There are all sorts of ways to bring audio into Audition. We're going to cover two ways in this tutorial, importing and opening. Other ways to bring audio in include inserting and appending, extracting audio from CDs, using the media browser, and recording audio directly into Audition. We're going to cover all those different methods in other tutorials, but this one we're going to focus on opening and importing. So what happens when you open or import a file? Well, the thing that doesn't happen is you don't move the file. The file remains in whatever location it was on your hard drive or whatever source you're bringing it from. You're not moving it around. You're not copying it and then pasting it someplace else. All you're doing is creating a link to that file, and the link will show up here inside the Files panel. So let me show you how that works. You go to File, and under File, you've got the Open command and the Import command. Now notice near Open, there's a thing called Open Append. We're going to cover that in a different tutorial. And then Open Recent just has all the recent files that you've worked on, which you can then open up directly this way. So we're going to focus on Open and Import. What's the difference? With Import, you're bringing a link to that file into the Files panel and not opening it in the editor. It just sits there in the Files panel. On the other hand, when you open a file, you bring it into the Files panel and then you open it here into the editor. That's the difference. The one exception is if you import a file and there are no other files in your project, it's completely empty as it is now, just empty there. If you bring in a file using the import command, the first one that comes in will open up in the editor. It's kind of the exception to the rule. So we'll start with that one just to show you how that works. Now notice when I click import, it opens up this flyout menu. There are two other commands here, raw data. Raw data is for when you have a file and it's missing its header information, and you need to tell it exactly what kind of data is in that file to bring it in. That's something we won't cover in these tutorials. Application settings are the preferences. You can import a preference settings as well, but we're going to focus here only on audio files and video files as well, but just in this case, audio files. So notice that the word file has three dots after it. Those three dots mean that something else will happen after you click this. Nothing immediately will take place. You'll have another option to do something after it. That always indicates that one more step is to follow this thing. That's what ellipses mean. So I click that. That opens up the Import File dialog box. Now you need to just track down a file that you want to import. So I'm going to go Working Files, Demo Files, and I'm going to take this first file on top. I'm going to click it and click on Open. Now what's going to happen is it's going to bring it in to the Files panel and display it inside the Editor panel, which is not the normal behavior for import, but it is if it's the first file that comes in. So there it is. It shows up in the Files panel, and here it is showing up in the Editor panel. Let me import one more file, and you'll see that that one will not open up in the Editor panel. Go File, Import, File. I'll select the second one down now. Click it, click Open. And now it comes into the Files panel and does not show up here. And you can tell that it's not showing up here, not only because you didn't see it change, but because the lettering here is white. When the lettering is yellow, that means that's the file that's currently active inside the Editor panel. If I were to double click this now, it would turn yellow, and then it would show up here inside the Editor panel. Let me go to the Open menu now. File, Open, and notice it has the little three dots after there, the ellipsis. So we'll click that. It'll open up the Open File dialog box. Looks all the world like the Import File dialog box, right? I'll click the third one down here, piano chords, and click Open. And that will open it here in the editor. Notice the piano chords is yellow, and it's here in the editor. Even though it's not highlighted, this one's highlighted. This is the one that's open because you can tell the yellow letters indicate that's the one that's open there. In addition to opening up files, you can open up sessions. So let me go to File, Open. I'll go to the Sessions folder by going Working Files, Multitrack Sessions, and opening up the session that I created for this tutorial called 0401. Now, if I just click on it and click Open, that's the standard way we've done things before, but you don't have to just click this button down here. You can double click on a file name to open it up rather than taking that extra step of clicking down here. So I'm just going to double click on 0401. That opens up the session file. There is a session file there. It's yellow, meaning it's the currently active session file. And then it brings in a bunch of other files as well into the Files panel. All the files associated with it, bass, guitar, lead vocal, and organ right and organ left, now show up over here. Bass, guitar, lead vocal, organ right, organ left. So that session file brings in all the associated files with it. Let me talk about a couple of keyboard shortcuts. If you open up the File menu again, you'll see that Open has a keyboard shortcut here in Windows of Control-O. Now whenever you see Control in Windows, the equivalent command in Mac is Command. So the keyboard shortcut to open the Open Files dialog box is Control or Command-O. And if you go down and take a look at Import, it's very similar. It's Control or Command-I. That's an easy way to open up the Import dialog box. But the way that I almost always work is to not use a keyboard shortcut and not use the file command here, but to use a keyboard shortcut within the Files panel. It's a very simple one to use. Just double-click anywhere there's an empty space. It can't be here where there's a word, and it can't be here between the word and the metadata. It can be over here on the left-hand side where there's an empty space. Or if there happens to be any space at the bottom, it could be there. But here it's just on the left-hand side. So if you double-click anywhere, that opens up the Import File dialog box. And then if I go back, let's say, and look at the demo files and click the fourth one down now and double-click on it, that opens that up. So double-clicking here opens up the Import dialog box. I'll do it again. There it is. I want to talk about a couple of shortcuts inside the dialog boxes, so I'll do that again. If you want to open up more than one file at a time, you certainly may. To do that, you want to open up, let's say, non-contiguous files, files that are not touching each other. I can click on this one, and if I want to pick on some other one that's not touching that one, I press down the Control key in Windows or the Command key on Mac, and then click, and that'll add that to the collection there. And now I have two selected. I can select another one by holding down Control or Command and select that one. Now I've selected 3 different files. If I click Open now, those 3 files will open. Let me just click away for a second to deselect those guys. I can also select contiguous files. These are standard ways to select files in Windows or Mac on basically any kind of a process where you're selecting more than one file. If I click on one and then shift-click on another, that'll select all the files from the one that was selected initially to the one that you shift-clicked on. Those are all contiguous files. That's the way to open up contiguous files. Click on one, shift-click on another, and that takes all the ones in between plus the 2 on the outside. So let me show you one more thing. What happens if you open a file that's not compatible? Now here's a file called an MTS file. It's actually an AVCHD high-definition video file that I've named AVCHD just to make sure you know what it is. An MTS is an extension used for AVCHD. If I double-click that, it looks like it's going to open, and down here under supported media, it includes MTS files down here. Where are those guys? Right there. So you'd think, okay, this is going to open, right? This is a supported file. So I'll double-click on it, and I get this error message. It says, warning, we are unable to open this file using the currently available importers. If you'd like to use Dynamic Link Media Server, then you can, and then it should open because Dynamic Link Media Server works with the files that are available in Premiere Pro. So right now, if I go to Edit, Preferences, and Media and Disk Cache, and here's the Dynamic Link Media section. If I enable DLMS format support and click OK, now when I go get that file, I go File, Open, double-click on this guy. It opens up. Look at that. And I've got the audio file there and the video file separately. So if you work with files that are not necessarily supported by Audition but are supported by Premiere, that's the way you can bring files in if you run into roadblocks. So that's the process of opening or importing files into Audition. And keep in mind that it's a reference-based process. You're not moving those files. You're merely creating links to those files here in the Files panel.